Daewoo Matiz has been produced for the second decade, first in Korea, then in Uzbekistan. Indeed, due to its small size, simplicity of design and poor equipment, even the new Matiz is still one of the cheapest cars on the market. And second-hand, Matiz looks modern even after 17 years, the merit of the Italians from the Ital Design Studio, who expected that the Lachila concept would become the prototype of the new serial baby Fiat Cinquecento. But Fiatozzi rejected the project, and Giugiaro sold it to the Koreans. And technically Matiz is Daewoo Tico, which in turn is a 1982 Suzuki Alto. Not the worst design for its age. And if she had any childhood illnesses, they were long cured by the Japanese. From Tico, Matiz inherited a 3-cylinder engine with a volume of 0.8 liters, with distributed fuel injection instead of a carburetor, and since 2002 with a converter, a mechanical transmission and suspension elements. In 2002, the engine received a brother with a 4th cylinder and an additional 12 horsepower, being less loaded. The liter unit usually nurses the resource promised by the plant of 200,000 kilometers. Of course, the figure is not God knows what. Today the average mileage of engines up to 1.5 liters is 250 to 300,000 kilometers. But equally archaic, albeit more powerful, 1.5-liter engines on a relative of Nexia usually last only a little longer. And the weak and poorly balanced 3-cylinder engine of the base Matiz sometimes requires a major overhaul with cylinder bore after 130 to 150,000 kilometers. On trifles, both engines begin to bother even earlier. A malfunction signal on the dashboard sometimes appears after 10,000 kilometers. The spark plugs fail. Sometimes, with a very low mileage of about 20,000 kilometers, the engines start to run unevenly or stall, asking for a replacement throttle position sensor, intake manifold pressure sensor, or cleaning the idle speed controller. High-voltage wires and ignition coils for 0.8-liter engines often fail early, and the ignition distributor with an electromagnetic sensor often needs to be replaced, and the very first inaccurate engine wash can sentence it ahead of time. The liter versions initially had more reliable electronic ignition modules. Appeared on the younger engine only with its transfer to Euro 3 at the end of 2008. By 50 to 60,000 kilometers, a burned-out muffler may loudly require repair, and the fuel pump may need to be replaced. The latter happens more often in cars with steel rather than plastic tanks. Which of the tanks is installed on the car is a lottery, and when buying a gas pump, be careful, they differ in the type of gas tank. Every 20 to 30,000 kilometers, motors need an extremely simple, a screw with a lock nut, to adjust the clearances in the valve mechanism. The plant prescribes to update the timing belt every 80 to 90,000 kilometers, but its brakes, sentencing the cylinder head to costly repairs, are not uncommon. It is better not to take risks and change the belt with rollers ahead of schedule, after 40 to 60,000 kilometers. And do not forget to install the cooling system pump driven by it along with the toothed belt. It will probably not survive until the next one. After 5 or 6 years, the trouble with engines can be added by oil leakage from all cracks, seals and seals crack. With an enviable regularity, sometimes already after 15 to 20,000 kilometers, the diode bridge burns out at the generators. Dismantling the generator from the cramped bowels of the engine compartment is difficult, and servicemen often offer to lengthen the winding leads and move the diode bridge to an accessible place. But there is also a more civilized way to treat the disease, replacing native Delphi or Mando generators with more reliable Valeo production units. In winter, small and weak standard batteries are often made nervous, unable to revive Matiz in severe frosts. Wires for lighting in the trunk will definitely not be superfluous. Because of the torn rubber corrugation, the clutch cable turns sour, which is already not very durable. If at the same time the smell of burnt friction linings of the driven disc indicates that the clutch is not fully engaged, the resource of the latter will be halved, and usually the clutch lasts 80 to 100,000 kilometers. The gearshift cables of a manual gearbox are no less likely to jam. The drive becomes tight and fuzzy. Over time, the mechanics show a signature feature, the crunch of synchronizers when switching down quickly. The Jatco automatic transmission, like the mechanics, will last 150 to 200,000 kilometers. Interestingly, the automatic was installed only on Matiz with a weak 0.8-liter engine. With a larger 4-cylinder engine, there is simply no place for it under the hood. And since the end of 2008, Matiz with an automatic has not been delivered to us. It was not possible to fit the engine with it into the requirements of Euro 3. Matiz younger than 1999 also come with a V-belt variator in the transmission, but we have only a few such cars from Europe or Korea. Their purchase is a dubious option. It is unlikely that it will be possible to repair the variator, and for a new one you will have to pay half the cost of a used car. The suspension resource is also small. The first to fail after 30 to 40,000 kilometers are the adjustment-sensitive roller-tapered bearings of the rear hubs. The front double-row ball bearings last up to at least 60,000 kilometers, but if you collect all the holes on the road with small wheels, you will have to change them as often as the rear ones. The same is with ball bearings that are integral to the front levers, which, with careful driving, have to be changed after 50 to 70,000 kilometers. After the same run, you usually need to update the rack and pinion steering bushings and tie rod ends, and the shock absorbers can last up to 100,000 kilometers. By the way, new wheel bearings will also be needed when dismantling the hubs to replace weak wheel studs, in which, with excessive zeal, the thread easily breaks. And that's not it. New front bearings are also needed after 60 to 80,000 kilometers when replacing brake discs worn out by two sets of pads, which are attached to the hub from the inside. And the rear bearings may be needed even earlier, when replacing the brake drum combined into one part with the hub, which is poorly protected from dust and dirt. Because of this, many owners suffer in the winter with rear pads freezing to the drums, and after a couple of winters, they have to restore mobility to the ratchet mechanism for automatically adjusting the gap between the pads and the drum and change the brake cylinders that are wedged from corrosion. It does not spare rust and body. It is devoid of even partial galvanization, and the quality of Uzbek metal, like that of Nexia, is questionable. Matiz will last 3 or 4 years without additional anti-corrosion treatment and plastic wheel arch liners, and then brown spots will begin to appear through the paint on the bottom, at the bottom of the doors and on the rear wheel arches. Approximately a third of all cars have an automatic transmission and they cost an average of 20,000 rubles more. Rare Korean-built cars are usually equipped with anti-lock brakes and front airbags, while Spartan-equipped Uzbeks often lack even power steering, and base cars older than 2005 have rear window cleaner and heating. Such savings on safety are useless, especially considering Matiz's tendency to fog up windows. Problems with visibility are added by a clogged or flying evaporator drain tube from machines with air conditioning and wedged heater fan motors. From an increase in load, the fuses in their power circuit blow out. But even with more expensive trim levels, optional equipment can be capricious. There is no power relay in the rear window heating circuit, and the contacts on the button for turning it on burn out. The fluid supply pipe to the washer nozzle located on the rear wiper breaks. Weak electric motors for door locks in winter do not always do their job.